Chas had this obsession with Hey Joe, you know, which really stemmed from when he'd first heard Tim Rose sing it in America. I guess just heard the record. And I don't think it was a huge hit in the States by Tim Rose, but Chas always believed in the song. And then he heard Jimmy play it as a part of his set when he first met Jimmy. And I think the two things were coincidentally fused in his mind, Jimi Hendrix, Hey Joe, you know. And when Jimmy came back to England, they took him into the studio, and amongst the things they tried to do was Hey Joe. And it worked extraordinarily well. But it was not the kind of record that you would normally expect to have got into the top 30 charts of that time, which were dominated by things like Engelbert Humperdinck and the Walker Brothers and Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Pigface. Chas, I think, knew that, but he also knew that he'd already begun to create a buzz about Jimmy by doing a few gigs, and all the guitarists had come to see him in England. I mean, Clapton, Beck, Townsend, they'd all turned up at the early gigs that Chas put on at the Bag of Nails with his chum John Gunnell, and a few other little London gigs.
Jimi Hendrix, when he arrived in London, was greeted by all the people, all the stars of the blues scene, as a kind of the authentic voice of American blues. And when he arrived, he also had this tremendous stage act, which his manager, Chas Chandler, had encouraged him to develop. So it was more than just another blues band. The Jimi Hendrix experience was, in fact, a whole new musical experience. It was a combination of jazz, rock, blues, rhythm and blues, and psychedelia, all in this little trio, this extraordinary group. And I think the effect of that on other musicians like Pete Townsend of The Who and Eric Clapton, of course, was to feel, my God, this is the true voice of contemporary music. And I think, although they admired him and idolised him, I think they were also rather alarmed by him. He was competition, basically. It
meant that there was an interest in whatever it was that Jimmy was going to put out as a record. But Chas still had to give it a helping hand to get it into the charts. And there was considerable speculation on the New Musical Express at the time that money had passed hands. And I don't think there's any doubt that it did. But once he got it into the charts, of course, once he brought it into the top 30 area, that meant that you started to get automatic exposure on TV, radio and other places, because the charts dominated and dictated at that time how much exposure and airplay you were going to get. So once Chas had got the ball rolling, it then started to sell of its own volition. And that really sort of like took Jimmy off. But the thing that really mattered most, I think, was the press buzz that had been created by the gigs and by the people who went to see him, and how everybody was talking about him. And every time there was an interview with Keith Richards or Clapton or Townsend or Jeff Beck or whoever, the Jimmy Page, whoever was around at the time, they all raved about Jimi Hendrix, you know, and what an incredible guitarist he was, and how they'd never seen technique and skill like it on the guitar.